Good evening. It is Thursday, April the 14th, about 9:30 p.m. My name is Shay Gibson with Weather Flow. This is brought to you by Sail Flow for the Sperry Charleston Race Week 2016, and also an update for the Chucktown wind report as we look at our winds and weather for the next 2 days. Let's go ahead and take a look at the surface map as we have high pressure still blocked to the north, and that's keeping the northeast wedge driving down the coastline into our area. The gradient is very tight over our area as this undulating front sits to our south, and all this residual troughing offshore helps increase the gradient over along the coastline. So a lot of this moisture is coming from mid to upper level low pressure, and the jet stream aloft carrying some of this moisture and clouding overhead. Some of this rain is not actually making it to the surface, but we are watching this area right here overnight as some of this cooling process has allowed for some of this moisture to actually drift up from the south and up towards our area. So if we look at the GRU on radar, we can kind of get a better idea of where this swath of moisture is. Last night we saw some of those blotchy areas of moisture making it across the upstate, and by the time the sun came out, it sort of dried out along the coastline and didn't allow any of that rainfall to occur. So we could see some of this moisture making it up over our area by early morning hours and into the sunrise hours. I do expect that rain to sort of fizzle out as the day goes on tomorrow. If we take a look at, let me go ahead and enable the model fill. This is the HRRR, the high resolution rapid refresh model. It's really good for rain, and we'll do the run on this one real quick, and you can see how as we get into the morning hours, that rain spreads up into Charleston by about 3-4 o'clock a.m. and then it sort of spreads into the area by mid-morning. So we could see some showers. I don't think any convections or thunderstorms, but just some passing showers nearby. This isn't an exact model. It's just giving an idea that there may be some abundant moisture in the area in the morning hours before the coastline dries out. So here's that run one more time with the HER 3, and there you go. So we have a little bit of chance of rain in the morning time as the winds drive into the coastline and some of that moisture comes across from west to east. So let's take another quick look here. The Charleston bump offshore, some convection over the Gulf Stream, and some clouding overhead. We saw some mid-level to upper-level clouding, and we did see this afternoon, we saw some of that clouding overhead. It was mostly a stratus deck, but then we also did see some of that dry line occurring along the coast where that cleared out, and that's what actually got the winds to come up today significantly. So if we look at Datascope, actually there's a picture from today that I wanted to go through, and here's some of the peak values this afternoon when things really started to crank up around 1:53 p.m. and we saw that east-northeast lean, and we saw the winds coming up to 22 knots and 26 knots at Folly Beach to our south. As we got to the harbor, we see that east lean like we talked about last night in the forecast, and then sort of banking in along this landmass and creating its own little sea breeze coupling effect right through here. So there's probably going to be some wind streeting again tomorrow through this area. The winds are expected to be stronger. I'm going for about 21 to 25 knots tomorrow on a tighter gradient. So the beaches, that's specifically for the beaches with higher surges, and as we get inside the harbor we could still see 19 to 23 knots or even 20 to 24 knots. So we're still expecting winds to be up in the same fashion that we've seen the last couple of days, as long as that sea breeze coupling occurs out here. If not, if it remains cloudy, a little bit on the rainy side, we may see more of a northeast flow along the coastline, and then that would make this more of an east-northeast flow into the harbor and actually increase the speeds right through here. So it makes it a little bit difficult whether or not you get the sunshine and the dry line along the coast to have that sea breeze coupling on the east-northeast bend, and then it bends east as you head inside the harbor mouth. So we'll wait and see what happens there. But here's our GFS model, and we're going to look ahead a little bit. Here's the next 24 hours, and the GFS is showing a little bit of that moisture making it up. We go 48 hours, and we see the low pressure out in the Atlantic starting to develop more of a mid-level feature, but it could gather some surface features. I'm not concerned about that being anything extratropical or subtropical at this point, but it does merit watching with this high pressure to the north biting down into it and giving it a little bit of top spin, and that always merits watching. It's not going to be directly capped overhead for a Rex block situation, but it will. This high will start to slowly slide down to the southwest as we get into Sunday. So if we look ahead one more day, we'll see that pattern start to shift. But this is what we call an omega block, where we have low pressure out here, we have low pressure over here, high pressure in the middle, and what you end up with is this kind of a shape right here, and this is called an omega block. It's shaped like the Greek letter omega, and this pattern is expected to stay in place from tomorrow afternoon and all the way through Sunday. As we may even see a low pressure develop down here. This would become a Rex block with high pressure here and low pressure down below it. So kind of a joke going on with what was it that we were calling it? Rex Omega block for this particular setup. But either way, what it really means is a tighter gradient along our coastline with that low pressure offshore with some increased swell, especially the offshore values. And as we go into 72 hours, we see the high dropping over the Great Lakes. And then as we go into, that's at Sunday afternoon, and then as we go into Monday, we see the highs start to drop down a little bit west of the Ohio Valley, and it really starts to erode. The high pressure ridge starts to erode overall, and then we finally get a cold front. It looks like it's going to try to push through the area by Tuesday. So it looks like this whole blocking feature looks to break up by Sunday and into Monday. So taking a look at Datascope over the Charleston area, I wanted to see what the latest conditions are. First, let me go ahead and get rid of this GRE on radar. That helps create a little bit of extra lag on the computer. A lot of things running in the background here, but here's 20 knots right now at the Isle of Palms, gusting to 25 knots. That gradient is holding pretty strong along the beaches. I'm actually pretty surprised, even with the cooling mechanism in place, that we're able to hold 20 knots at the beaches. So 20 there, 24 knots at Folly Beach, gusting up near 30 knots. So we still have a very strong gradient going on there. Inside the harbor, things have fallen off a little bit, 17 knots gusting to 22. A couple of pulses here and there in the harbor, and then we'll see the same pattern tomorrow as the sun comes up. And then these values, once again, like we saw this morning, they'll be a little bit more offshore. So we saw some north-northeast values this morning. I'm expecting more of a northeast flow by the time we get up, especially here in the harbor. And then as the sunshine comes up and some of those rains dissipate and the sun comes out, we'll start to see that bending effect or the refractive effect along the beaches with the sea breeze coupling, and then that easterly flow back into the harbor again. But the values for tomorrow look like they're going to be pretty strong. So I'm still, like I said earlier, I'm going to call for that 20 to 21 to 25 knots along the beaches and about 19 to 23 or 20 to 24 in the harbor. So I'm going to run all the models here for the next 2 days. And let's zoom in on this. And here's model guidance for what's going to occur overnight. You see some jumpiness by the HER 3 kilometer, a little bit of jumpiness in the NAM 5K. That's just due to some of those cooling effects and possible rains overnight. And as we get into tomorrow, by late morning into midday, the models jump up again, all pretty much from that northeast to east-northeast bend. A couple of models jumping up into the 20s, and we've seen this already where these models are under what the values will be. So we could be looking at 23 to 27 knots by between 1 and 3 p.m. tomorrow. We'll just have to wait and see what the gradient's doing at that time, but we do know that the values are going to be moderate to strong, at the very least moderate, and at the very most it's going to be strong and possibly even breaking moderate gales, especially offshore if we get some values up near the 30 knot marks. So as we get into Saturday, we see these models showing a little bit of downtrending by Saturday late as that pattern begins to break, and as we get into Sunday, we start to see the winds really falling down throughout the daytime as that high pressure erodes off to our west. So that's what it's looking like as far as the winds for the next 2 days. Is that northeast wedge is going to sit tight. We're going to have the strongest values, peak values, probably tomorrow, holding through Saturday, and maybe dropping off a couple of knots. And then as we get into Sunday, we see that breaking pattern. So I think that's going to do it for this report, and I'll be back on tomorrow to do another update. Until then, good luck to all the racers tomorrow, and I'll be back on soon. Thanks for watching.